I hear we need volunteers for this, or I hear there's a march for that. And my first thought is, okay, do I have anything on my calendar? Like, am I free that day?
Okay. This is Hourglass, the podcast for United Way of King County in Seattle. Coming up, we'll hear how United Way's Emerging Leaders 365 giving community is helping to redefine what it means to support people in our neighborhoods. Emerging leader Malena Magallanez and United Way's Senior Marketing Program Manager Taylor Roberson will discuss how emerging leaders impact the lives of local professionals and the communities they serve. We'll also discuss United Way's Our Neighbor Fund and hear about an upcoming volunteer opportunity. I'm your host, Joe Burris. Thanks for tuning in. Now, they could just show up at a volunteer event or fundraiser, put in a few hours of work, interact a bit with the locals, donate via Cash App or Venmo, take some selfies for social media, and then pat themselves on the backs for a job well done. But that is the old model of community engagement, one that focused more on the interest and donations of the volunteers than the needs of the community. And United Way of King County's Emerging Leaders 365, they're not having it. Emerging Leaders 365 is a group of more than 10,000 young adults who are passionate about engaging in a year of impact to support their neighbors. Emerging leaders commit to giving $1 a day or $365 a year, then come together to roll up their sleeves at volunteer projects and connect with like-minded residents at issue-focused events. Emerging leaders annually log 2,700 volunteer hours while serving more than 100 events. Emerging leaders make blankets for local charities. They support small businesses. They make and distribute signs for the annual Martin Luther King Jr. March. They engage in United Way's Happy Hour and Hello series, which allows them to network with fellow professionals over refreshments while learning about United Way's work. They attend our speaker series, which is designed for young professionals to engage in intimate, face-to-face conversations with other community leaders. And they take part in Lead United for Equity, a peer-to-peer fundraising event that allows them to create their own donor engagement activity for raising $10,000, everything from hot yoga to boxing to karaoke. So what types of young people join Emerging Leaders 365? Those like Kiki Roper of the company Windermere, who said she enjoys working to achieve a socially just community where everyone can be seen, heard, and respected. Or people like Albert Chang of Convoy, who says that the size and scale of United Way's programs assure him that his donations will help people experiencing homelessness. John Hermes of PricewaterhouseCoopers said he chose to become an emerging leader because he wanted to be part of a community of diverse, caring individuals that empower each other to help make Seattle a better place for everyone. And then there is Malena Magallanez of Focal PLLC. Malena is an emerging leader because she sees herself in many of the people United Way seeks to support. Having risen from poverty, she's paying back the resources, time, and talents that others gave her while she climbed the ladder to success. And she understands that some emerging leaders might have good intentions, but because they haven't experienced poverty or racism or marginalization, they might not be able to relate to those they seek to support. She offers perspective and discernment without being judgmental. United Way of King County is great to have Malena and John and Albert and Kiki and others serve our community as emerging leaders. They represent the future of community engagement, one that doesn't involve quick-hit projects with minimal interaction with the people and communities, but instead encourages them to get to know folks' stories, to see our common humanity, and to help because if you were in their situation, you'd want to be treated the same way. United Way recently sat down with Malena to hear more about her background and her work with Emerging Leaders 365. Here's what she had to say.
I was born, I think really there's no nice way to put it, into abject poverty. My mom was a teen mom. My dad, said, I'm too young for this. I'm not going to have anything to do with it. My mom was 17 when she got pregnant with me, and her 18th birthday gift was being dropped off at the welfare office.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. And so for me, I was raised with a pretty upfront knowledge about what the world is actually like if you don't have a lot of resources to you. And when I ended up in foster care is the easy way to put it, but it's actually a kinship placement. You're put with people you at least kind of know. I was 12, and I was placed with some family friends who were really, really dedicated to the idea of community service. And I was sent to schools that had a community service requirement to graduate. And when you combine that with what I had already known about the world and with an attitude my mom had brought me up with about even if you don't have money, you should still give what you can, whether it's time or even just $1 to someone who, if you're lucky enough to have a roof over your head, they don't. Those two things combined made me what I call a compulsive joiner.
Okay.
So I hear we need volunteers for this, or I hear there's a march for that. And my first thought is, okay, do I have anything on my calendar? Like, am I free that day?
Okay.
And it's been that case since I was 16. And I have been just kind of advocating for change in a political sense since I was 13. I've always been very politically active. And so those two things made me realize when I was in my early 20s and dirt broke that the thing I could do was volunteer.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And eventually I'm at a volunteer event, and it's actually being put on at El Centro de la Raza by United Way. And my path had overlapped with them once before, but it hadn't really stuck. And then I sign up for the email list, and I hear more about Emerging Leaders 365, and I start to hear more about United Way's core mission of, education and food and housing. And I'm a person who I spend a lot of time sort of just staring at my ceiling and thinking about the world, about what I'm going to do tomorrow, about everything. I'm a major overthinker. Mm-hmm. And so after getting an email about Emerging Leaders Board, I was sitting there and I was thinking about United Way's mission and about the fact that I had just recently had a conversation with a friend about how there's too many organizations out there, that not enough of them cooperate. And if more people cooperated, a lot more change would probably actually get done. And after thinking about that, I said, well, why not give it a shot? I applied to be on the Emerging Leaders 365 board, and they were crazy enough to accept me. And so that's how I got to be here.
That's interesting, a point that you made about how many organizations there are. That was one of the things that when I worked in philanthropy, I was a program officer for a lot of organizations in the Deep South. And it was amazing how many of them were actually doing the same thing. Mm-hmm. When you look at it, maybe they could be way more impactful if they could join forces. How does United Way bring that together in your mind?
To me, the most compelling thing about the way that United Way brings organizations together is the fact that they focus on grassroots community organizations as much as possible, and those organizations that have the ties to the community. Unfortunately, the nonprofit space, the philanthropy space, is pretty dominated by people who have money and people who haven't actually known those struggles. And that, to me, is actually a big factor of why there are so many organizations, because people have a bit of an ego and they're not so much tied up in the work itself, but in, I want to be the person who solves this problem. I wanted to be Malena Magallanez, the person who solved homelessness in the United States. And to me, that oftentimes means you're going into communities where you have no clue what's going on.
That's true.
You don't know, is this a gentrification issue? Is this an issue where the government 50 years ago built a highway and destroyed the neighborhood and never paid reparations? Is the hunger issue here because it's a food desert, or is it because the biggest employer in the area doesn't feel like they have to pay people enough to feed their families? And what I love about United Way is that the emphasis, whenever possible, is kind of on saying, hey, these big organizations are willing to give us money because we're a reputable name brand. And we're willing to work with these smaller organizations that have the ties to the community, who are speaking to the woman who is making sure that every kid has a safe place to go after school to get a snack, and saying, hey, we're willing to work with you. Hey, we're willing to, put you in connection with this organization that might be able to help you get food so that you're not paying for all these kids out of pocket. And that builds ties to the community in a way that builds up enough trust and also kind of forces these organizations to play nice with each other if they want that money moving forward. So it's a great way of like, if you know the phrase mutually assured destruction, it's kind of the opposite, mutually assured prosperity.
Excellent. Now, you, because of your background, you have a lived experience that you take into your volunteer work that maybe someone, even with the best intentions, that grew up, if not even necessarily in privilege, but just didn't grow up having experienced that. And all y'all coming together. What are those conversations like when you're doing volunteer work with someone who maybe is from the other side of the tracks and they mean well, but they might not get it because they haven't lived it?
My best friend calls me the queen of code switching.
Okay.
My foster parents sent me to a private high school where I was going to math class with the daughter of a congresswoman. My foster mom has always been very, very open about the fact that she saw great potential in me. And her dream for me was law school. That did not work out. I would have been a menace to society on a whole new level if that had. But because I was educated with a lot of those same people, it's easier for me to speak to them in a lot of ways. There's also the fact that I found my escape in books from a very young age. So my vocabulary, the way I'm speaking to you now, this is how I always speak. Terms like mutually assured destruction do get thrown around all the time. And people who come from greater resources oftentimes are more willing to listen to me. And frankly, after I figured out how to circumvent the problem of being tokenized, of being the pet person from the wrong side of the tracks who just happens to speak right or happens to dress right, I find that a lot of the time I can actually get them to reconsider certain biases they have. Okay. It also helps that a lot of the time I can pull I am pale as milk, so I am not threatening to you, but I am a Chicana and I am incredibly proud of my roots. So people oftentimes feel very comfortable saying some absolutely out-of-pocket things in front of me. And I can go, let's rewind a minute and let's discuss that real quick, because here's how that affected me. Okay. And I've learned a lot of interesting ways to communicate things and move through spaces that wouldn't have been available to me if it weren't for my unique lived experience. I got incredibly lucky. I had a mother who is incredibly intelligent. She made some very bad life choices. I wouldn't have had the childhood I had if she hadn't, but she passed on some important knowledge to me. And I had foster parents who, for all of their flaws, gave me incredible opportunities. And my foster mom also made it a point to tell me multiple times, you have these gifts and you can use that if you truly want to go out and make a difference in the world. We're handing you an opportunity here on a golden plate. And while I didn't necessarily do it in the way that they wanted me to, now as I move through these spaces with these organizations and these people who, they'll say things like, oh, well, why didn't this person pursue their higher education? I don't have a college degree. And you just said I'm one of the smartest people you ever interacted with. So what does that tell you about maybe some preconceived biases you have? Some of the smartest people I've known in my life are currently doing 30 years down in San Quentin prison because the world isn't always kind. And sometimes it takes someone who uses words like troglodyte while roasting that person they met on Bumble 2 weeks ago to actually convey that to the people who have the resources and have the connections to do a lot of the good I want to see in the world.
United Way's Senior Marketing Program Manager Taylor Roberson says Malena brings ideas to emerging leaders that help keep young people engaged. Roberson added that as the holidays near, Emerging Leaders members are staying busy in our communities.
We're in the middle of doing some peer-to-peer fundraisers. And what it is right now, all of Emerging Leaders 365 is really about collective impact. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like just a cool word, but it's really amazing to see it come together. It's a bunch of folks who might not have a lot, who are not billionaires, or maybe young professionals starting off in their career. And right now, folks are giving a little, to make a huge impact. So we're doing these peer-to-peer fundraisers, and folks are giving $10, $5. They're throwing exciting activities. Like I just went to one that's called Songs for Equity. Mm-hmm. And it was karaoke night. And you just make a donation, show up, have fun at karaoke. And everybody was invested in hitting the goal. The goal was $1,000 at night. And folks were cheering each other on. And it creates an energy and a vibe that's so welcoming and inclusive. And that's our environment at Emerging Leaders 365. That same kind of energy is brought to the other pillars of the program, like with our networking events, happy hour and hellos. It's not that kind of awkward, I don't know what to do, I'm here looking around kind of event. It's when you get a bunch of people in the room that care about community and they care about giving back, and they're generally warm-hearted folks. It just creates a really good time that you want to experience. And we coined the phrase, put the fun in fundraiser. So that was that karaoke night. Marcus Ramirez on our committee, he just did a Groove for Equity with Pop Rock Studio. So that's a dance studio he goes to. And they say, yeah, bring people in. We'll give you an hour of time. So then when people choose to attend, they just make a donation. It goes back into the community, helping our neighbors with hunger and housing. And then people dance. They gave a little, $20, $5. And together with everyone doing their fundraiser, maybe 14 people doing a fundraiser. And then other people are like, yeah, I can dance. Or, yeah, I love a chance to win some custom artwork. So here's a donation. Again, minimum donation. We're already nearing $5,000 raised in just over 2 weeks, really. And we have a goal to raise $10,000 this year. See if we can do it again with a match from Microsoft to match us at $10,000. That's $20,000. And again, that collective impact, Emerging Leaders 365 impact. We just care. We're young in our careers. We want to plug into community. We want to make connections. And we do what we can. And that does a lot.
Malena says the work of groups like Emerging Leaders and others across the country gives her hope that we can tackle the issues we faced with this reimagined approach to community engagement.
I think the thing that gives me the greatest hope is that I am not one of a kind. There are so many people like me, and I see it reflect back, honestly, people who are better than me, people who are willing to sacrifice their whole life, people who say, screw job security, I'm going to go out and do the work. I love the young people that I see who were with Food Not Bombs down in Texas when they were trying to give them all of these tickets for feeding the homeless. And they said, bring it. Give us the tickets. They took them to court and they won. Okay. And seeing that kind of energy, seeing that a contingent of the older generation that so many people my age thought had given up is actually getting almost more re-enthused, especially with certain social media platforms as people are able to communicate more and more freely. Mm-hmm. Seeing a new sense of community with this potential to grow. Now, it's not there yet. It hasn't reached its max potential by any means. It's still a seedling. It's not even ready to be put in its own pot yet. But I see so much potential there. And for the first time in a long time, I look at even my own peers and I go, I want to be like you when I grow up. I want to have your enthusiasm. I want to have your optimism. I want to have your passion. And I want to have your willingness to say, pardon my language, no to the BS, no to being told that, well, that's just the way things are. That's the way we've always done things. To have these people who are just this amazing intersection of, I'm not taking, that's how it's always been as an explanation, but also an optimism and a willingness to get involved if you give them a practical explanation of, hey, this is who we are, this is what we do, this is why you should join us and why your work here would matter, is really, really promising for the future.
Thank you so much, Malena, for speaking on behalf of Yale 365.
Thanks so much for having me.
For more information about United Way's Emerging Leaders 365 giving community, log on to uwkc.org/emerging-leaders-365. Our neighbors are doing their best to keep food on the table, but it's not been easy. During the COVID-19 pandemic, grocery prices rose to their biggest increase in 50 years. Most of the federal dollars that addressed the food crisis during the pandemic are gone, but grocery bills remain high. That's why United Way of King County has launched the Our Neighbor Fund to invest in strategies that will feed families in the coming year. Our Neighbor Fund will help expand our home grocery program to provide 5,000 families with free groceries each week, and it will help an additional 100 schools in King County implement the Breakfast After the Bell program, impacting 49,000 students. We're asking you to please make a gift to the Our Neighbor Fund so that we can serve more of our neighbors. For more information or to make a donation, log on to uwkc.org/donate. Join us for the Holiday Exchange with Community Passageways on December 7th from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. at 306 23rd Avenue South, Suite 101 in Seattle. Here's a chance to roll up your sleeve and take action against homelessness, hunger, and poverty. You can help United Way grantee Community Passageways assist their neighbors with all-day festivities, including painting and games. For more information, log on to uwkc.org/events. At United Way of King County, we are working side by side with communities to build an equitable future for everyone. Hourglass United Way is a podcast that highlights how we and our partners spend time making a difference in our communities. Our work is made possible by the generous donations from people like you. Please send comments and suggestions about our podcast to hourglassunitedway@gmail.com. To learn more about our work or to support United Way, log on to uwkc.org. I'm your host, Joe Burris. Thanks for listening. Until next time.